Imagine serving in the Canadian military only to be coerced into taking experimental pharmaceuticals, gaslit when your health begins to collapse, and then surveilled by the very country you risked your life to protect.
That's exactly what happened to Brian Isted. He spent over a decade in service as an infantry officer reservist, a military police officer, a close protection team leader in Iraq, and later as a cyber intelligence analyst when COVID-19 hit.
From deep inside the system, he witnessed the government's pandemic response unravel, driven by fear, devoid of accountability, and propped up by reckless policies like lockdowns.
No evidence, no due diligence, just blind obedience. Then came the mandates.
While training to join JTF-2, Canada's elite special forces, Brian took the vaccine. Shortly after, his body began to break down. Blood clots, autoimmune disorders, and a rapid decline that would force him to end his military career.
When he asked if the vaccine could be the cause, they didn't investigate. They told him to stop doing his own research.
This episode is Brian's story, but it's bigger than that. It's about what happens when loyalty is met with silence, when sacrifice is met with gaslighting, and when the government turns its surveillance apparatus not on foreign threats, but on its own citizens.
From spy planes circling the Freedom Convoy to the rot inside Canada's political and military class, Brian pulls no punches.
You're listening to the Blendr Report. This is our conversation with former intelligence analyst and Canadian veteran, Brian Isted. Brian, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, fellas.
Excited to get chatting. So first off, why don't you just give us a quick overview of your military career, what got you into it, what ended up with you leaving, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the finer details.
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined the military in 2013 as an infantry reservist. I had we'll call it a long career, maybe a decade or so before that, of sales and marketing. And I just decided that I was no longer interested in doing any of that stuff. So
I mean, you're built like a brick shithouse, so it kind of makes sense that you got out of the office. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's kind of part of it too. I grew up as an athlete in the GTA, playing hockey like all my buddies. So it kind of made sense that I was just tired of the same old business stuff that I really had no intrinsic interest in. And I realized I'd taken policing in both college and university with a criminology degree. So I figured I was going to get into policing, but the military hired me first. So I went into the military as an infantry guy in the reserve in Toronto. That lasted about 4 years. And then I transferred to the Reg Force, or full-time army, in 2016 as a military police officer. Completed my training that summer of 2017, and then deployed almost immediately after, a few months later, in early 2018. With that deployment, leading a close protection team. So it's a fancy way of saying bodyguard for VIPs, high-ranking officers, sort of dignitaries overseas. Yeah. Finished that deployment successfully. Everybody came back in one piece.
And where was that deployment?
That was in Iraq, in Baghdad, Iraq, with what's called the MLT back then. I don't know if it still exists, but the Ministerial Liaison Team. So those were the folks helping facilitate the rebuilding of Iraqi infrastructure. So training, equipping, everything that would go into working with the MOI, or the Ministry of the Interior. I can sort of circle back to that later. I think it might be a relevant point to do that. But coming back, I was immediately sort of installed in my original position that I was posted to as a military police officer, as a cyber intelligence analyst with CF Incom. So that's Canadian Forces Intelligence Command, which is a sort of umbrella group of a bunch of different intelligence teams and doing completely different things. Many of them very siloed, so people don't sort of talk to each other outside of specific clearances and assignments. My assignment was cyber intelligence, focusing on transnational organized crime, crypto, and terrorism. So how the cyber realm sort of related to that, and how those three things kind of bleed together a little bit. So that was a really interesting and very fortunate posting that I received in 2017, but didn't end up starting till late 2018, early 2019, when my clearances and everything came through. And then I got to be exposed to some very interesting information at a very interesting time to be exposed to it. And that sort of kept me going until mid 2020, when I was posted out to be sort of a paper pushing officer nerd in procurement, where I was trying to spend money on new equipment and the peripherals that go along with that equipment and training for the military police branch. Wasn't really my forte. I did it because I was asked to do it to the best of my ability, but it was not something I really enjoyed doing. It was by the next spring, I had tried out and been picked up by JTF2 at CanSoftCom, where I stayed for about 4 months into their training, 3 or 4 months into their training, at which point I demonstrated a bunch of deficiencies. I just didn't hack it basically for the first little bit. So I was basically sent home. And it was the same week that I was sent home that my health problems started happening almost immediately. It was actually, I was still in field while I started having aches and pains that I couldn't really explain. I just chalked it up to being in intense training, a high op tempo, all that stuff. Cause it was no joke. Like, that place is not for the faint of heart. If you don't have a good work ethic, do not go there.
Because the JTF2, that's the kind of top tier of special forces in Canada.
That's the tier 1 in Canada, yeah. So essentially having crazy pain in my leg, ended up being a 6 centimeter blood clot that I was sort of rushed to an emergency ultrasound in which they determined that. And then I was on blood thinners. I wasn't back to work for many weeks. Ended up eventually going back a couple months later to another sort of administrative position, at which point continued back pain, chronic fatigue, a heart problem. All these things kept being diagnosed just one after the other, to the point where I was sent to what's called the transition center, where you're basically kind of put in a holding platoon until you're sort of released, whether it's medically or your own recognizance or whatever. I do want to touch on a couple things before I head down some rabbit holes and diatribes of what the CF does wrong and all the things that are sort of need to be corrected.
Yep.
There are still a lot of people there that do a lot of things right. And they're very intelligent, motivated, savvy individuals who hopefully stay there for the right reasons and can try to correct the course of this ship. And I want to, there's so many people, like I won't go into names or specifics, but I do want to mention the transition center folks specifically because of how well they treated me on my way out when everything was going wrong at the same time, which is very helpful for someone whose career is kind of almost over immediately type thing. They did a really good job. I would recommend, and I know not everyone has the same experience. Mm-hmm. People have sort of vastly different experiences depending on their circumstance or who they dealt with or their location or whatever. But I do want to recognize those folks as they did a really good job, and I'm thankful that I had them in my corner when I had them. That being said, I will go into a lot of details about folks who I hope do leave and never come back, and people that sort of learn from those mistakes and try to correct them moving forward.
Let's sort of establish why you left and what happened. So you're saying you're feeling pain in your leg, you have, blood clots, you have heart problems. Ultimately, how did this all start?
So upon being picked up by JTF2 on a successful selection performance in the spring, you get what's called joining instructions. So you get a 10 or 15 page document that just outlines all the things that you need to do and bring and where to be and when the training starts. And one specific instruction on the JIs, or they're called, is you will be fully vaccinated. So the time frame is now, it's spring, almost summer of 2021. Mm-hmm. And I had not yet received the vaccine rollout had only been out for maybe 5 or 6 months at that point.
That's right. Yeah, in Canada.
So I didn't want it. I didn't think I needed it based on all the data that I'd seen leading up to it and the sort of anecdotal accounts of folks who had gotten it or hadn't for whatever reason. And I just thought, I'm going to try to not get this, and hopefully it goes away before they start being insane about it.
Yes.
But I reached out to the OR or the orderly room at CanSoft and I said, I don't have this. Course starts in 2 weeks. Do I really need to have this before I get there? And they said, well, yes, you do. You don't need to have both because that's kind of condensed time period, but definitely get one and then we'll sort you out when you get here type thing. So And I'll admit, cowardly, I rolled up my sleeve and I got it. But when you try to do something for close to a decade and then you finally do it and you achieve the goal that you set for yourself when you get there,
of course,
you know what I mean. That's how I justify it to myself.
Well, you get there by making sacrifices. That's life, especially if you want to accomplish something great. You make sacrifices, and for you, this was one more sacrifice. I think a lot of people fall into that category. So I don't think it's cowardly. It's vulnerable, which I can appreciate. But I think it's like, hey, you put in the time, and this was the last hurdle, and you trusted people that you thought you could trust. So I think you can give yourself a little flexibility there.
That's fair. Thank you for that. But I'm just trying to be sort of hyper transparent about everything that was going through my mind and how I feel about it sort of retroactively. But so I get my first shot, and I think June, no real issues other than I think I had a sore shoulder for a couple of days. I didn't really feel anything to write home about. But fast forward, I guess a month later or so, and we're sort of still in our in-doc period, sort of administratively being introduced to all the things that you're about to do and how to deal with all these changes and everything. It's kind of it's a nice sort of transition period into where you don't get much sleep after that, or you do, but it's sort of it's not enough. But they basically, the platoon warrant stood at the front of the classroom of all of us, and there's, I don't know, dozens of us there, and he said, who here doesn't have their second shot or any shot or anything like that yet? And only me and one other guy put our hand up. So in a room of that many people, when it's only you and another guy, it's like, and he looks at you and says, go to the med tent right now and get it. That's what I did. You know what I mean?
Of course,
so
right.
I just thought, like, this is how I'm going to blend in. You know what I mean? I'm doing what I'm told. This was on the JIs. I knew this was coming. This is not a surprise to me. I kind of hoped that I would skate by and maybe nobody would do it. I even, again, complete transparency, I even kind of in the back of my mind thought of maybe I can talk to the medic and say, hey, dude, do you mind maybe squirt this on the ground, or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, don't put it in my shoulder. But
yeah,
it's an integrity thing, and all these other guys have probably actually done this. You know what I mean? So am I going to be the guy that doesn't do it just because for selfish reasons, or am I just going to do it and hope for the best?
yeah. I also think it's really difficult being in any sort of military position, because the whole like the macro concept is do what you're told, and it's for you're here for the bigger picture. So it's really, really, like, I get it sometimes, you know, if you're a teacher, you're like, hey, I'm not going to do this, whatever, I'll figure something else out. But your whole life, and not your whole life, but your life's work was based on following these sets of rules. So again, I just can't really give you shit for it. I see it. I get it.
I appreciate that, but it's yes and no to the doing what you're told thing. I would say in the regular or what they call the Green Army, Air Force, Navy, whatever, it's just a colloquial term to refer to sort of outside of specialties. They pick you up, or they're looking when you're on selection or when you're in training, and they're trying to identify unique attributes. Like, one of the things is outside of the box thinking. I'm sure that I don't know exactly the criteria, but I have an idea. They don't tell you, and unless you're on those selection staffs, you don't really know. But you're supposed to be a critical thinker and thinking outside the box. So having those doubts or having contingencies is something that hopefully they're looking for. But in this case, it was black and white, and it is you do it or you don't.
So you did it, and then?
So I get it. And that night I had just horrific night sweats, fever, shakes, chills, like everything that you would associate with all the negative side effects of a flu shot or whatever that I don't think I ever had.
No,
I've had maybe a handful of flu shots in my life. I wasn't super studious about getting them. I had no reason to doubt them, but I never sought them out, kind of thing. You know, you remember in school when they did those kind of needle parades where everybody lines up and you get your Hep B or
yeah, that was like
whatever.
What, like grade 7 or something like that. I think that's the last time I got shot with anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hadn't really ever experienced these. So I spoke to the medic, or I spoke to someone, maybe it was a nurse or something, shortly thereafter, and mentioned it, and it was normal. I was told that's normal. That's a healthy reaction to the shot. It indicates that your immune system is strong and it's recognizing this. And I'm just thinking, okay, you know, maybe, but it was, so that night I got no sleep that night. It was horrific, and I was just exhausted for the next day or two trying to recover from that. And then it was almost immediately thereafter, within days, the fatigue, like more aches and pains, just everything. And again, we were on ranges almost immediately after, or immediately after in-doc was ranges. So you're running long days with heavy weapons, heavy armor all day, 30-degree heat. You're supposed to be tired and sore. That's what happens, and you just deal with it. But it was to a level where I hadn't really experienced before, and I kept thinking that it was my own deficiency. Like, why can't I keep up? What is wrong? I'm going to bed super early. Lots of the fellas are up in the shacks playing baseball and drinking beers, and I'm going to bed at 9 because we're getting up super early, and I'm really struggling to sort of just maintain homeostasis at that point, let alone thrive in this environment that kind of demands a lot of you. So fast forward a few more months, and it's just sort of situation no change, like the same thing every day, fighting to get out of bed, the back pain growing and growing and growing. We've been at that point now, we're into the fall, early fall, late September, early October. And I have this pain developing behind my right knee, which is just sort of above my calf, which I chalk up to being oh, I've got like, I twist my calf sore. We've been in the field for not crazy living in the bush or anything like that, but we were in field in Petawawa for I guess a month at that point. And I just thought it was muscle soreness, overuse, whatever. End up going through all that administrative headache with talking to the senior leadership, them deciding to send me back, going back to my unit. And within like 48 hours of sort of being back in Ottawa, I was not able to walk. Like the pain was so, and I feel like, I'm not trying to pump my own tires here, but I feel like I have a relatively high pain threshold. I can push through enough. And I could not stand up. I could barely walk. And I sort of begrudgingly drove myself to the military hospital in Ottawa, where I sort of limped into the emergency sort of triage area, where the nurses kind of recognized this. And I can't remember the fellow's name, but I think he knew what I had, and he sent me immediately to the ultrasound to confirm it. And that's when they said, like, you're on blood thinners right away. You cannot go back to work. This is actually quite dangerous. Luckily, it was below my knee. So a blood clot that's anywhere above the knee is exponentially more dangerous and problematic because of how much more easily it travels to a major organ system like your heart, lungs, or brain, and you have an aneurysm, and then like those things are potentially fatal. So that's seriously problematic. So I was sort of on bed rest for a while, and then just one after another, things just kept going wrong, and I couldn't understand how I went from being what I felt like a strong performance in selection, which is a 10-day job interview where it's nonstop sleep deprivation, physical challenges, psychological challenges, a mixture of both, teamwork things where you're, you know what I mean? You have to be in the prime of your physical existence and mental existence, or you will not make it. That's just how it is. And you shouldn't, you know what I mean? That's fair. That's merit-based system. So how I went from that to this hobbling mess in the hospital, you know what I mean, is I couldn't explain it, and it was seriously demanding a lot of my bandwidth psychologically.
Sure.
And I started just asking a lot of questions of the medical system, like the first hematologist they sent me to, that I think was a civilian, if I remember correctly. So sometimes you see military doctors, they're in the military, but they're just a physician, or sometimes you see a civilian doctor in the military, or sometimes you see a civilian doctor outside if it's a specialist. So not that really matters. It's just kind of a distinction of, I was being sent all over the place.
Yes, I know what you're saying.
And I ended up at this hematologist, and I said, I've been doing a lot of reading because I had a lot of downtime. So I did what you're not supposed to do and did my own research. I did my own research. And I said, aren't blood clots one of the listed side effects of this? It seems to be relatively common amongst people, especially fit people.
Yes.
I found out fit young people had these sort of elevated risks. And the doctor said to me, and I'm quoting directly, stay off Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't have any social media. I've never had social media. It's not an indictment of social media. It just doesn't interest me, and I have no need for it. I've never really had a need for it. So to hear something like that from someone who is just completely dismissive of a question or claim is pretty disheartening and enraging. It took a lot of self-control to not flip that desk over and tell the dude what I thought of him. But and I'll get to sort of later on, if we circle back to it, how many more conversations I had that were quite suspicious and suspect.
Well, were they giving you any alternatives to the cause of this blood clot, or were they kind of just, here's a prescription and let's not think about it any further?
It was literally, here's a prescription and let's not think about it any further. And a detail that I missed, which I may or may not be important, but when I was lying down on a gurney, when that doctor came to give me the news that the ultrasound had detected the blood clot, there was literally, I think it was a young girl. I say young, she sounded 30 or less, maybe somewhere around that age, a couple beds over from me that also had a blood clot. Relatively. And it's not like I'm being nosy, or I'm trying to, you know, that curtain of silence that they put around, it's silence is nothing. Like I can hear the entire conversation happening 6 feet away from me, and she was being treated for a blood clot. And that's when I got kind of visibly annoyed with some of the staff there. And I said, what is going on here? But she has it. And they basically said, every time I asked something was like, stop asking questions, take these medications, and you're not going to have to work for a while. Just shut up and sort of get better type thing. It was pretty unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, it's interesting to get that sort of like your entire take, because that was,
It's exactly what I thought it was. You know what I mean? Like I didn't get vaccinated. I had COVID early on. When I saw something come to market in less than a year for a vaccine, when it should take 7 to 10, I'm going, I don't think it's not going to work for me. And like you said, you just start seeing all of these symptoms and all the problems everybody's having, and that was a huge one. Happened to a lot of people. Like I know a number of people that died. I would say at least a half dozen that were like under 45, and there's no real reason they would have.
Dozen people that died.
Yes,
Holy moly!
Yeah, and that's just the people that we think it was from being vaccinated. One of them used to work for me, so it was just kind of this whole thing. It was just that's exactly the experience I expected. But I do find it challenging. You look at a system where they're supposed to you're supposed to have informed consent, which means they have to know everything to tell me what I need to know so that I can make a decision. They don't know any of this information. None of them seem to have any. Buddy tells you to stay off Facebook. It's because he goes, I don't have any other thing to tell you. I have no good answer. So here we are. Do you want to know what informed consent looks like at D&D in 2021? So it was I guess it was another way of saying a needle parade or a vaccination parade, which is what they call it in the military. So if you were in the sort of the Ottawa area, you went to Connaught Ranges in sort of I guess that would be the west end of Ottawa. There's a little base there, and they had a mod tent set up, like a huge mod tent, which just means modular tent. So you can kind of make it as big or as small and as whatever the shape you kind of want. So it's this big L-shaped tent where you walk in, and your informed consent was a whiteboard with a green Sharpie that had written 30 points or whatever it was of why you're getting it and how safe it is, and it's super good for you, and don't ask any questions. It's like I'm obviously being, you're being facetious, but I get it.
But that was your informed consent.
Yes.
The nurse or doctor that was standing there said, "Have you read the board?" And you go, "Yeah." And do you have any questions or whatever? And if you did, I'm sure they would have had great answers for you back then.
100%.
You know what I mean? But
read the board, son.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I said, okay, I guess. And then you go and sit down. They give it to you. So that's your entrance into the L. Then you hang a right and you go and sit in a chair. And they monitor you for 15 minutes to make sure you don't have a stroke or whatever, and then they send you home.
Right.
And then I got on my bike and I ripped back to my house, and that was it.
Well, yeah, even outside of the military, it seems like that was the exact same procedure. So I have somebody that was very close to me that had severe side effects after getting the second dose, and to the point where getting rashes that turned almost like alligator scales. Teeth going brown because her body was trying to take out all nutrients, calcium, and all of that into the center. Also ended up had a genetic, like a latent form of genetic cancer that only gets activated under extreme circumstances. And so not that the vaccine specifically gave them cancer, but it looks as though it activated that during the side effects. And so that's been a whole 2-3 year process, still dealing with it. But through that entire time, very similar, getting gaslit. No, why are you asking questions? Going to the point of being like, I've been healthy my whole life. One of the healthiest people I know. And yeah, so to bolster that point, looks like inside of the military and also civilian, just your average hospital, it was very much, don't ask any questions. You're just being a tough patient. You're actually making our lives harder by just not letting us do what we want to do.
Well, don't forget too, they had those pop-up clinics, right? So remember that was that one Toronto doctor. They're getting paid twice as much to administer these vaccines than any other vaccines because they all there's a payment schedule. So there's a couple of rules though when you get paid. One of them is that you have to use your own staff. They can't be an extension of you. It has to be specific staff that work for you. And it has to be at your clinic. So there were doctors in Toronto. This one lady had to pay back over $600,000, if I remember correctly, for administering all these vaccines because she did pop-up clinics in 2 different locations in Toronto with not even her own hired help. They were just students. I'm going, who got the informed consent there? I'm gonna go with fucking nobody.
And they were drive-through clinics.
Yeah, like what are you talking? Like you also get a free thing of fries too. I'm like, what are we doing here, man?
Form of vaccination.
It's just horrible. You know what's so horrible about it is like you do it to all these people that have such negative side effects. But the thing is, the fact that they were allowed to employ a system like that is what's so dark to me. Whether it's in the military or outside of the military, it doesn't really matter. That they were able to do something at that scale, that quickly, and it's basically there was just no sets of rules. There's none. And if you said anything, you were censored. You were shut down. You were told to shut up and just read the board. It's just, to me, it's such a mess. I just feel bad for you. So what did you, I know I kind of want to take back and have a better understanding of, the military games and how, and more about what happened with you through the military and that whole experience. But I'm curious to know, since you have recovered from that, how are you doing now? Like, what's going on with you, your health, everything else?
So I got the blood clot was the fall of 21. So if we fast forward with continuing chronic back pain, weird, I don't want to say if palpitations, maybe that's not the right word for it, but I had a couple instances where I got really lightheaded, sort of heart racing.
You can feel it.
Just it's stuff I'd never felt before. And again, being super functional athletically, I take really good care of myself, and like my diet, my training, everything's been on point for a long time. I'm known almost to an anal retentive level with a lot of my friends, kind of tease me about it, but it's just, I don't know, it interests me and I enjoy doing it. So here we go.
You're a high performer. It's good.
You're very kind. Almost to the day a year later, after I'd had MRIs and x-rays of my back, the doctor confirmed that I now have a rare form of an autoimmune disease in my spine. So this is something, so in fairness and transparency, both of my folks have an autoimmune problem, but I had almost no back pain outside of heavy deadlifts and squatting, and you know what I mean, or tweaking it on a good run or whatever, you know what I mean? You sleep it off and in a day or two, you're fine. But this was like building and building over months and months, where I was waking up feeling sort of nauseous because my back hurt so much. I replaced my mattress thinking that my mattress is junk. Maybe my spine's out of alignment or something while I'm sleeping. And the blood work and all this stuff confirmed that I have what's called ankylosing spondylitis. So it's it's a bit of a mouthful. It's a bit of a mouthful. So it's a rare form of autoimmunity where your spine is basically growing new bone and trying to fuse itself into sort of a rigid shaft where worst case scenario, your back ends up being a piece of bamboo that doesn't bend type thing. So that's worst case. I hopefully will not get there. It doesn't seem like I'm on the track to get there. Again, a lot of these things can be sort of mitigated, or for lack of a better word, controlled with diet and exercise and stretching and mobility stuff.
I have an autoimmune condition as well too. So I
take it very seriously to do all these things.
For sure. I have Graves' disease, which I gave to myself. So it was too much output. It was just constantly like, go, 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 go. I had my foot on the gas for 30 years. Like I just did not know how to turn it off. Whether it was, so I did a lot of bodybuilding competitions as well, like that kind of stuff. That's super, super hard on your body. Sports, you name it. I'm training my whole life. Like I never, and also being an entrepreneur, like I don't know how to shut it off. I'm getting better now. I've had to. But so whether it's physical or whether it's mental, I'm just always fucking full throttle. Yeah. So I just gave it to myself. And then it's interesting. It's the parallel that I will draw. I don't want to go too far off course from your own story, but I was similar in a sense where like I consider myself a relatively high performer and I take it very, very seriously. Whether it's, training all the time, doing bodybuilding shows, whether it's, just trying to be athletic, trying to live forever, you name it. So through COVID, what happened was they shut the gyms down. Now I'm built a little more for speed, not long distance. So I started running a lot more, and I was running like 10K every day. And that's a lot. It was a lot for me. My body was it was not happy, but I just kept going. I'm like, shut up, you're fine. The voice in your head just, no, I can beat you. Let's just keep going, keep going. Then I couldn't run 10K. Then I couldn't run 5. Then I couldn't run a kilometer. Then I couldn't take a case of stairs. Then I had the shakes. I thought I had Parkinson's. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So basically it ended up being Graves' disease, and it's a thyroid problem, and everything's all fucked up. My heart rate, my resting heart rate was like 120.
Wow.
It was fucking wild. I lost like 30 pounds. I looked dead. But it was similar in that feeling of, now I've got it under control. Diet, not being too crazy. I don't like that I still can't go 100% ham because I want to, but I got a lot of it under control, similar to you. But it's that feeling of going, I know what I can do, and now my body's letting me down. Now, this is a little more self-inflicted, but it's that same thing of like, I know I can be great, and right now I'm super beta. Fuck this. It's hard. It's difficult. So it's a
tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, very much so. So I feel that.
To go from 150 to 0 almost overnight.
Yes. Yeah. So I was just, I can at least, I feel your pain.
I can't remember the race car driver. It's a really great quote though. And he said, it's not the going fast that kills you. It's the suddenly stopping.
Mm.
And you know what I mean? Psychologically.
It's a really good one.
Psychologically, emotionally, that's what happens to someone who has a physical problem or a psychological problem that causes sort of physiological issues.
Right.
Or both. Where was I? But yeah, so my folks both have an autoimmune disease. So I'm definitely genetically, I think, more predisposed to doing it or having it. But if I can sort of skip ahead to all the research that I was able to do, again, reading, figuring out that anecdotal stories and studies and research, it seems that people that have this latency, like you said, your friend had this rare sort of triggerable cancer problem. It seems like whatever latency I may have had was sort of turned on overnight.
Yes.
Where I was doing fine, if not excelling in the peak of my physical health and performance in my mid to late 30s. Overnight, I was not. So again, there's a correlation and temporal association, whatever you want to call it there. I'm not saying this happened because of that. I don't know. But when I asked questions, everyone told me to stop. And so now I've got this blood clot the blood clots are sometimes, and again, I missed another detail. So right after my issue of the blood clot, or around the same time, another guy in my same platoon, again, high performer, elite athlete guy, he also had a blood clot. Like this, like there's a pattern forming here. And if you start ignoring these details, it's problematic. So now I have this going on. The blood clot's enough for a lot of people medically to be released, depending on what your job is or your role. So now I've got this back problem, and now I'm telling different doctors that I have this issue that I feel in my chest. They refer me. I had to wear one of those. I can't remember what it's called. It's like a machine that monitors your heart rate and rhythm. And I had to wear this thing for 3 weeks, where you have these wires hooked. It's a nightmare to sleep with this thing on. But you can only take it off to bathe, luckily, and then you immediately put it right back on. But you're just snagging yourself, and it's like whatever. It was an annoyance for a few weeks or a month or whatever it was. And there was inconclusive results from that, and I still have to see this gentleman every year or so to make sure that nothing's going on. But there was something going on that nobody's able to explain to me. And I can get into more conversations later with other doctors if those details are important. But that was basically once the ankylosing thing came up, I basically just asked to be like, I'm done here. Like I don't have anything left to give. I think I've given enough. Not in a way of, you know what I mean? I've given more than any. It's just I just burnt out. I said I don't have anything left in the tank. I'm running on fumes. Send me to the transition center, and where I met all those great folks who were really sort of kind to me on my way out. And that was it. Like 6 months later or something like that, like I was out of there.
So currently you're dealing with the autoimmune condition that you have to keep under control with diet and lifestyle.
There's no cure for that.
Be interesting. Yeah. Be interesting to chat maybe off camera, just sort of about the peptide space, the stem cell space. That's like, I went down that road, gene editing, all that kind of stuff. So like I have some interesting information. I don't know if it'll apply. It does for me. So maybe it would for you. I don't know if that'll help. I'll give it to you. So you're dealing with the autoimmune condition. And then you have to see a doctor once a year just to sort of keep an eye on your heart, essentially. Is there anything else? Otherwise, you're kind of finding some balance? I
think there was a whole bunch of mental health stuff going on in the background for all that too, which I was hyper honest with all the medical staff about how I was feeling, and sort of just the severe levels of sort of distrust and disgust with the senior level people. And the civvy world is hard to compare anything I've done. I'm sure there's other things that are very similar in terms of dedication and involvement. But when you're in the regular force, Army or Navy Air Force, and you're in the military, these people control your life. They control where you live. They can control you working hours, 7 days a week, 5 days a week, 0 days a week. You know what I mean? On COVID lockdowns or whatever. But it's like you just have this overall sense of lack of control, and it can be very good because you can think, okay, I just have to show up. I no one has to, I know what I'm wearing. I know what I'm doing. Like that can be sort of freeing in a way, you know what I mean? But once you're on the other side of it, and there's all these questions of, I don't have my old job anymore. I don't have my dream job anymore. I don't have this. I don't have that. But still all these people control me. It's like, no. Like I need some control back. I need out of here. And I decided that the best thing for me was to pull the pin, and they kind of grabbed my hand and took me there.
Was that a big deciding factor? Yeah, that you kind of started to just reject wanting to be part of that system and that institution as a whole, as well as the medical stuff on top of that. Was
absolutely. So that's a very fair assessment of it. And what really bothered me was that, like, call it naive or whatever you want to call it, but I was thinking that if I got to the more elite teams, if I was to be amongst, you know what I mean, people who, you know what I mean, or the cool guys in the movies and all that stuff. I'm just trying to give people sort of a relative comparative of like what you think it's going to be like when you get there. And I have buddies that are there, and you know it's not actually like that, but you kind of are like, oh, maybe it's better than that. It's hopefully better than the Green Army, which is good and bad. But you get there, and then you realize it's kind of the same thing, and you're like, oh no, you know what I mean? It's still just this bureaucracy of
course,
roll up your sleeve, wear your mask. Like I did selection in a mask in 2021. So you're in a stress position after running whatever it was I ran in the morning at 4 a.m. at 15K or whatever with 1,000 burpees. And then you sit down in a stress position and you put your mask on.
Yeah. I'm like, guys, get fucked.
And it's like, and you can see on the face of the people running it that they don't think this is they don't give a shit. Like they probably don't even want you to do it.
No.
But everybody's bought in. Everybody's doing this. And it's like, is nobody going to ask questions and just stop doing this? Because if everybody stops doing it, we can just stop. We can stop doing it.
It was a weird mass psychosis effect that happened when everybody just kind of jumped in line. And it's a couple of things you realize is people would rather fit in than be right. For sure. That was a weird one for me. It was also weird for me that sort of identifying, you can see really, really hyper intelligent people, but they've got blind spots. And I've noticed that most people have arenas or areas in their life where they have these blind spots where they're no longer the logical, intelligent human. They go down to this emotional state. And then this, you can't get back up here. It's overridden. And it seemed like society at a macro level, they all got put into this hyper emotional state and no one was using logic. And it was so strange to see because just how many intelligent people and how many intelligent people we all know that we watch just kind of fall in line. I'm like, what are you people doing? Are you brainwashed right now? What's happening? It was just insane to see at such a high level.
The paradox too of, all right, we're training you to walk into literal gunfire and where mortars are going off. And these are like the scenarios that we're prepping you for, but we also need to make sure that you don't get harmed by a virus with a 99% survival rate.
Yeah, you're like, what?
It doesn't fit.
You should have to bathe in COVID. Let's get ready for this shit. Like what?
But what were some of those things within the institution, within the machine, so to say, that started kind of flicking that switch in your mind of going, oh, I don't know if I want to be here anymore?
So it's exactly what you just said. So perfect segue and timing. So you're talking about very intelligent people sort of just towing the line, not asking questions or doing what they're told or any combination of that stuff. So if we rewind back to 2019, do you want me to go into the games now?
Yeah.
So the fall of 2019, I believe it was October, mid-October-ish, 2019, when the Wuhan games happened the World Military Games happened in Wuhan, which you folks did expose on, which thank you, because nobody is talking about that. And I don't understand how this went under the radar.
Well, I just want to give a little bit more credit there to the base work that we used for some of those videos that we did was actually from Sam Cooper, who is phenomenal. And he's been breaking out a lot of that.
Brilliant.
So yeah,
that's great.
For sure.
Thank you, Sam, as well. So I had the only reason I'm kind of aware of it or more aware of it at the time was that I had two friends that went, because it's not really a lot of people are involved in it. We don't have that many teams that we send. We don't have the money in the Canadian military to facilitate these expensive travel. Yeah. Which is okay, whatever. We shouldn't be burning taxpayer dollars on, military sports. You know what I mean?
I'd rather see them do that than the Green Slush Fund or literally anything else you name.
Yeah, there's always good, better, best type scenarios of money spending. But it's like, okay, so we send a couple of my friends over on the volleyball team, and they come back, I guess a couple weeks later, however long it was, and then that's when the reporting, I guess you want to call it, started. It was early November in the intelligence community, because that's where I was at the time, that there was something going on sort of virally or some type of, I don't want to call it a pandemic, but the intelligence community was tracking this pretty early on, that there had been some type of correlation between Wuhan in the fall and a bunch of soldiers coming back really sick, sort of quarantined on the flight on the way back, which the documents were tried to be hidden, and then somebody brilliantly sort of exposed those a few years ago. And the only reason I kind of knew about it wasn't happening in meetings that I was a part of, but it was sort of around the water cooler talk. People were sharing sort of open source, or not open source, but common sort of not specific information, so specific that it has to happen inside of a specific skiff. Like you can just talk about stuff at the water cooler that's going on.
Stuff where there's crossover where you don't really know where it's coming from because everyone's got that piece of information.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. But one of my friends made a joke, which I thought was funny at the time, that one of them might have been patient zero, you know what I mean? Bringing this mystery thing back or whatever it was. And that didn't really click for me until you fast forward a couple months later, because I actually took off at the end of November to Australia to sort of lick my wounds after failing my first selection attempt in the fall, because it happened around the same time as all that was going on with the games, which is why I wasn't really tracking at the time. But I came back mid-January, and it was full-blown intelligence was all over this. It had sort of just reached open source media at that time, where CNN and the fear-mongering sort of had begun. And I started thinking to myself, like, well, if this thing really is, you know what I mean, that bad, then we're going to see we're going to know it's that bad because it's going to be it's been circulating since October.
Yeah,
in theory, right?
Yeah, I guess when you track from here to here, you're like, is this still a conversation?
Because I'm not an epidemiologist or infectious disease expert, obviously, but if a super contagious, dangerous virus has been unleashed to how many countries are at the World Games? 100 and something were represented there.
Yeah, it was a substantial number.
So
for sure.
I'm not saying that this was released deliberately, but if I was going to release something deliberately, what would be the best possible place to release it deliberately would be to the entire world's military in one shot.
Well, and just for context too, right? Those games were held in Wuhan, which was literally just down the road from the COVID
I kind of glazed
lab.
over that.
Yeah.
But the Wuhan military games. So again, make that of what you will. Go down a rabbit hole on the internet if you want to. I kind of suggest you do. So now it's mid-January and this thing has spooled up 10,000%. And there's meeting after meeting after meeting. How are we going to handle this? And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I want to be fair to the powers that be at the time, because when you don't sort of have complete fidelity on a subject or a situation, overreacting in the public interest is probably better than underreacting. So if we go ahead to March, where you have January and February of all the fear mongering that's gone on, all the social media clickbait, the death toll counter on CNN that's running nonstop, I will even give the benefit of the doubt to the folks in March that did the 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Same.
It's like
First lockdown,
up until
I'm good with
then,
it. Yeah.
It's like I saw a lot of information. The chain of command came to us in, I think it was early March, it might have been in February. And they basically, my chain of command, I can speak for, and said, because I'm an intelligence analyst, all my job all day, every day is to sit down on the computer, several computers, using level 3, which is top secret or above information, level 2, which is secret, and then open source, which is just anybody can access. You guys are familiar. So it was my job literally all day, every day to use these 3 tools to find information and then tell people what I think is going to happen based on the patterns that I'm seeing. That's what intelligence is.
Kind of interesting.
And I'm not a trained intelligence officer. I was a military police officer in a billet role as an intelligence analyst, but you get training on how to do it.
Yeah.
And again, I'd like to think I'm a relatively bright person and I like working hard and doing my job. And that's things that I take pride in. So I was trying to produce and find information that I thought was valuable. And the more and more research that I did, I just kept seeing that like, this is really only kind of dangerous to old people, sick people, and very old people that are sick. You know what I mean? If you were sort of one of those 3 or all of those 3 or 2.
Fat people.
Yeah. Overweight people, obese people. You had a real risk there.
Yeah.
And this was sort of well documented. And I recommend a book, Diary of a Psychosis by Dr. Tom Woods, if you haven't read it, that goes into intimate detail about how much data there was almost immediately upon the fear mongering of this disease. So fast forward sort of to mid-March, and we're being told, find out as much information as you can, whatever file you're working on. So for me, cyber has nothing to do with, well, maybe that's not fair. I'll touch on that as soon, but like my file sort of got put on pause and I was just looking into COVID, like try to find what COVID, that's the appetite for the intelligence community, find out whatever you can, work all day on it and send it up. So that's what I did. You know what I mean? I sat at my desk and I just looked at what was going on with COVID. And again, credit to those who they didn't know. And this is a direct quote from a very senior official that I know. They weren't aware of what it was going to do to supply chains and all the things that obviously got affected sort of immediately thereafter of the lockdowns. And they didn't really know. And I'll take his word for it because I trust him. But it was after that 2 weeks when it was 2 more weeks, 4 more weeks, 4 more months. It's like it just kept going on. And my job still, as I said, there's not really a relation to cyber in terms of the effects of COVID, but there kind of was, because the mass fear PSYOP campaign that they ran on COVID is cyber. That's all introduced to you via social media, which is, I'll sort of pivot here again, because at the time, I didn't know what I was looking at. And then in hindsight, it's almost completely clear now. Some of the reporting that I was exposed to, and I'm going to try to be as broad as possible here because I don't know what I can and can't talk about for level 3 stuff. So my clearance was top secret, special access, TSSA. Everybody has that in the field that I was in. It's not unique to me. It's like relatively common in those circles. And then you have subcategories of gamma, which I don't know what that means. Gamma, you have access to gamma information, or you have TK, talent keyhole, or a bunch of other acronyms, and they're all sort of siloed levels of what you can or cannot look at depending on who needs to know. And all that makes sense. I get that. It should be that way because it's just too hard to compartmentalize too much information. So a lot of things I was looking at in the cyber realm were talking about the amount of troll and bot farms that exist in some nation states like North Korea, Russia. China.
Macedonia is bad too.
There's Iran. There's a bunch of countries that are exceptionally good at producing really negative information on the internet, be it false, manufactured, or some combination of anything. And again, cyber and terrorism are my bailiwick, and I'm relatively new to this, but I'm trying to understand the connection. Why does this there's definitely a pattern here because it's coming up quite a bit. But what are they hoping to achieve by, you know what I mean? Fat shaming or what, like whatever it was. Like it could be minor, it could be major. There was an event, I think it was a meeting of like a white supremacist group paired up with somewhere in the US. Again, I'm failing on dates and locations here, but one country used Facebook to pair a white supremacist group with a minority group or something like that, and put them in the same place at the same time.
This was Russia, yeah.
And
it was
so this was done deliberately as a psyop through a cyber channel to cause unrest within the U.S. population.
It's pretty smart. Actually, strategically, it is intelligent.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So if this is happening at a grand scale, and I wrote his name down here. So Dan Woods was a CIA cyber ops guy back in the day. I don't think he's there anymore, but he was the one who was quoted all over the place as saying up to 80% of Twitter traffic is probably a bot and or a troll. So keep that in mind, people, when you're reading the internet, that it's probably not a person that's going on about trans whatever, or you know what I mean, or some crazy psyop thing that nobody, you know what I mean, really is losing any sleep over. But now you're all spun up about it because 7,000 people on Twitter said that their kid is a cat now and needs or you know what I mean? Whatever it is, is this real? Probably not. Like 80% of this is probably not real. So I'm digressing quite a bit here. I'm trying to put this on
it's good.
Coherent flow. But at the time, I didn't understand, why are they using these tools to do this? What are they trying to gain from it? Like, how far could it go? Can we not just sort through all the mess here? And it's sort of clear now that they can control the mind of a population on social media.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
By just steering your feed, steering your TikTok, steering everything you look at to be one more rage bait after another, feeding you the thing that gets that dopamine hit or whatever is the opposite of dopamine in your brain, you know what I mean? That causes like you to wake up pissed off, go to sleep pissed off, be afraid of everything. And it all happened almost at the exact same time as this COVID rollout. And it just seems like what a perfect way to package and deliver a mass psyop fear campaign to get everybody to toe the line. And I'm going to come all the way back again to you saying, like, what caused all these brilliant people to ignore or not care? And I'm sitting in these meetings and I'm talking to folks and I'm thinking, and again, I'm the cyber guy with the least amount of experience. And I don't even belong in a lot of these rooms with colonels and majors and the admiral, you know what I mean, who's the chief of defense intelligence at the time, or CDI. And the reason I'm in these meetings is because the lockdowns are going on and we're only allowed one person from our team in the building at a time because we're all going to die of COVID if we go in at the same time.
Of course. And
I was begging to go into work. I was like, I was already sort of the de facto team lead because nobody else was there. So now I'm the team lead. And I said, can I come in more often? Can I do, and part of it was, again, transparency. I wanted to use the gym at work because I was sneaking into the gym, even though the gym was closed, I was sneaking in. But I'm sitting in these meetings and I'm looking at PhDs, MDs. There's literally rocket scientists that work for Incom that need to track and present information about what are the capabilities of China and Russia's rocket systems. Well, who better to explain that than a rocket scientist? Yes. So you're in a room of people where I'm just like, I'm licking the windows, you know what I mean? compared to the people in this room. And I know that. And I love this. I like this job a lot, and I'm super keen on being there, partly because I just want to get out of my house, but also I like being around. I like being. I like
so good.
I like being around brilliant people, and I learned a lot from the guys on my team and other teams, and these people were just cool people to talk to and learn from. And I'm sitting in this room watching one of the MedInt or medical intelligence doctors present a chart to the admiral of the most fear design chart ever of how many bodies there's going to be, how many beds we're not going to have. And if you recall, all those depictions and the forecasts of how bad it was going to be sort of early on in the spring and summer of 2020, it was like we were all dead. You know what I mean? And none of really the data, if you spent 8 hours a day on a computer, really represented that. But if you opened a newspaper or you clicked on CNN or CNBC or MSNBC, CBC, that was all you saw. And I'm sitting in a room with the most brilliant people in the country, presenting information to the CDI, who's the Chief Defense Intelligence Admiral, who briefs the CDS, who is the Chief of Defense Staff, who is essentially a politician now, who influences the policy of the Prime Minister, the Minister of National Defense. Like the information that he gets is what goes up to influence or make a policy regarding the military, regarding the population in general. Like this is important information. And this medical intelligence person is presenting the front page of the Toronto Star. Not literally, but yes, literally. You know what I mean? Like this is the chart that came out of the newspaper. And I'm not going to say that open source information is invaluable because it absolutely is. And a lot of the stuff that you can gain on open source, if you know where to look, is good information, especially for finding second and third, fourth sources that you don't want a single source report.
Yep.
And I'm sitting in this room and my mind is melting because I'm thinking, what am I missing here? Like, is this really that bad? You know what I mean? I don't know anyone that's died. I don't know anyone that's even really become sick from it. All of my friends are sort of just enjoying their time off work. And that's where I really started to notice the pattern of the people that were making decisions and not questioning things are the same people that don't have to work anymore and never missed a paycheck.
Right.
It's quite scary to have the people that are making the policy continue to get paid, continue to get raises incrementally, and then they're off to the cottage for a month.
So I just want to unpack kind of what I find crazy about that is that, you know, we all definitely were inundated with the phrase, trust the experts, right? That we were led to believe that the people crafting policies were going through the hard data, the stuff that maybe the public didn't even have access to. It was top tier data, and that's what was guiding the policies. But what you're talking about is how behind the scenes, these quote unquote experts were actually really a lot of the times just taking worst case scenarios from media outlets, like for instance, the Toronto Star, who has an incentive to publish, say, the most outlandish thing, you know, in a time when everybody's scared about this. They can sell a newspaper much more if they go, oh, hey, this is how crazy things are going to get. You know, the news space, there was no incentive for saying, hey, this isn't as bad as we think it is. And then so that is what was actually guiding a lot of the policy, was these kind of actually maybe just even fear mongering from the media campaigns.
I don't know for sure if I can say that it was guiding policy, but it certainly was guiding people's decisions on what they were presenting to the people that were influencing policy. And if maybe they weren't doing it even, I'm not going to maliciously say they were doing it deliberately. But if even somewhere deep down, if you know that what you keep presenting keeps everybody off work and you get more time at the cottage, you get more time with your kids or whatever, you know what I mean? Then maybe subconsciously you're going to keep recommending these strategies. And Ottawa is like the DC of Canada. Everyone there is plugged into the government on some level and none of them had to work anymore. And there was no consequence and output was like more or less the same, which means that how many useless people do we have in the military and government in general that like once they stopped working, nothing really went any differently, which is quite scary. But yeah, it's exactly that. And I want to for sure go on record as saying that it was definitely not the overall sort of data that was sort of aggregate being used to show the facts and figures of who was actually dying. It was just these wild projections that is, what was it, 50 million people, 30 million people or whatever are going to die of COVID. And it was like, man, nothing that I'm finding is saying that. So again, like this window licking captain a captain in Ottawa is nothing like your toilet paper in the military and as a captain. So I'm sitting there thinking I'm missing something clearly because it's so much worse than I've seen anything show and I can't find the right information. I'm obviously failing at my job as a human. And it just, I started literally kind of like going crazy a bit. because I can't work out as much as I want to.
Yeah.
Everything's being fear-mongering. Like masks started coming up and being mandatory. And I'm like, this is so ridiculous. We need to stop doing this. And high-ranking people are telling me off the record that what we're doing is a severe overreaction. They're telling me this, and I'm not going to say who it was. It doesn't matter. They weren't policy-making people, but off the record, they're telling me this is an overreaction. This doesn't need to happen. And I'm even more mind blown. And I'm just sort of super upset and enraged, just as anybody was. It's not unique to me, but that sort of really left I think the original question many minutes ago was like, were you sort of disenfranchised with the leadership and the health problems? And was that the reason that spun you out? And when you put all that together in aggregate, it was yes. It's like, now that I can't do the thing that I worked really hard to do, and I really don't have any faith or trust left in the people that I thought were running this for the right reasons, I have nothing left to give here. Like, I don't want to poison the well. I'm poisoning it quite severely right now. But I don't want to be there anymore and stay there long enough to see myself become the villain, or whatever Harvey Dent said in Batman. Mm-hmm. And it was like a really cool line because it's very true. So I just left, and it was, people really need to, I hope a lot of people see this and they understand that it was not ever about your safety, your health, or protecting you. It was about, here's the decision we made in March, and we're going to keep doing whatever we need to do to justify it so that it looks like we did the right thing. No one ever said, wow, we really kind of overreacted on that one. Let's ratchet it back a bit and give you your lives back sort of in a tapered incremental way, or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that's the right solution, but it was definitely better than what we did. And people need to absorb that. And I think a lot of people have, but
I think so too. I think for me, it was funny. So I had several businesses in the hospitality space when it happened. So we got kneecapped, and it's fine. It's just being entrepreneurs. You figure it out. But for me, like my sort of perspective is that Canada is like a wife that cheated on me. And I'm like, you can say it's going to be the same, but it'll never be the same. So that's for me, just in terms of how I feel about like kind of like the country at large, I suppose, but really the government. I'm just like, you guys, you knew what you were doing. You did this to all of us. You took businesses away and opportunities away from generations of people. Like, that's just so terrible when you see that. But it also kind of made me wonder, what were they using it for? Like, what are you implementing? Because what was it? I think it was Trudeau that said, never waste a good crisis. I'm sure a lot of people have said that. But I believe he was on camera saying that in the last 10 years. And so you look at this and you go, you guys have basically manufactured a crisis, because let's be charitable and say, well, the virus leaked out. It wasn't intentional. Okay. But let's still look at the numbers. Not that many people were dying. Like you said, it was old people, sick people, fat people. That's just the truth. It is what it is. So, it really wasn't that dangerous, but they beat the drum on how dangerous it was for several years. But we all know that wasn't the case. And anybody using the logical part of their mind, even for 2 minutes, they go, yeah, we're overreacting. This is nonsense. So then it just begs the question, for what reason? What are you trying to employ? What are you actually using this for? What is it leveraging for you? Because they kept it going for so many years.
Well, what I think is really interesting is what you pointed out, is that there was just a lot of even personal incentive within the halls of the people making these decisions of, well, I don't have to go to work really anymore. I can just screw off to the cottage and my responsibilities are gone. My paycheck keeps coming in. One interesting aspect about that, especially when it comes to public officials and bureaucrats, is that they know their paycheck isn't going to stop. I mean, they get funded through taxation, which is non-negotiable. It's not like a business where you're thinking, I have to make revenue. Mm-hmm. Like, the revenue is going to be there within the government. But even on the ground level, I actually saw a very similar phenomena with the people that were supporting the policies, where everybody that was completely on board with the lockdowns. Now, again, I was just in the same boat where March, hearing about this, probably thought, yeah, 2 weeks to lock down sounds like the right idea. Figure out what's going on here, get rid of it while we can. But then you change your mind. But the people that never changed their mind were the ones that really enjoyed working remotely. They didn't have to commute to work anymore. They could work in their pajamas. They could actually even slack off and not do the work that was expected of them anymore. Those were the people that I found fighting tooth and nail to support the lockdowns continued for a year and two into the future. And so even that's, I think there was definitely people at the highest levels of society that saw this as a unique opportunity. I mean, how Klaus Schwab wrote a whole book about how COVID gave us an opportunity to fundamentally restructure our societies. But I think the mass amount of people, it was just they were completely okay with these things because it granted them essentially freedom from their responsibilities. But yeah, like what was the overarching mindset within those people that you saw within the halls?
I don't think it was this cabal of, you know what I mean, we're in bed with Klaus Schwab to lock everybody down type thing. I don't think that these people are organized or intelligent enough to honestly pull that off. But what I do think is that once, it's exactly what you just said, once the ball was rolling on remote work, never missing a paycheck, months off, and the people realized that this was just something they could get on board with. And the Ottawa's making all the decisions for Canada, and then provincially the lockdowns were handled, but it was more or less an echo of whatever Ottawa said was happening. It was, they just benefited from it in Ottawa. So the rest of everybody's going to do what we're doing because this is good for us because we work for the government and we don't have to do anything anymore.
Yeah, I think it was a step, like an incentive structure from the top down. I think that we're talking about the people in the second and third row.
Right.
So I think the people in the second row are the people that are the government people, maybe people within the military, kind of doing what they're told because they can all benefit, go to the cottage, whatever. They're the ones that are employing these things because there's the incentive structure is there for them, get paid, time off. Then you got the lower level who are also benefiting from these decisions at this level, which are, anybody yelling at you, put a mask on so they can stay home for 2 more years and not have to go to work. But it's that top rung. And I sit here and still try to wonder because there's something that I'm still missing. I'm not sure exactly what it was. You can look at the Great Reset. You can look at the economic side of things. You can look, I just don't know. I don't know that we're going to find that answer today either. So maybe it's just somewhat rhetorical. But there was definitely a top to the pyramid of people that were making decisions that were employing these strategies that then fed the incentive structures on the next 2 layers. You know what I mean? And it's such a blind spot for me. I can't figure it out.
Right. Well, and that's something that we've talked about frequently as well, is that you don't need a conspiracy where there's aligned incentives. So I'm very much of the similar mind where I don't see the world as, a small cabal deciding exactly how things go. But I do see if you are in, say, administrative positions within these institutions, you can just create, it doesn't have to be a lot of people, but you can create certain incentives that then the actual people within the institution that do, say, the day-to-day work will just completely go on board with it and they'll just follow where that incentive leads. But you kind of, you briefly touched on the intelligence side of things within the COVID world and how these reports were flowing up the chain. But what did that exactly look like within the military in that point? Because something that I've dove into, there's an excellent breakdown of, it's called the COVID Dossier. And they break down, it's actually scientists who break down how all these directives were coming from military intelligence, all the policies. We even saw with Fauci, he says, well, the 6-foot distancing rule kind of came out of nowhere. There was seemingly no actual scientific studies on the mask stuff. So do you think that it was, say, the military itself that was directing these things, even the propaganda campaigns? Because we were kind of led to believe that these were health officials that were making these big decisions or pushing for certain policies. But to me, everything I've seen, it makes it look more like it was the military side.
I think that's entirely possible. I don't have personal experience with that other than what I've shared of what, if you put all those pieces together in the background of like, why are these people doing this or why are they not doing this? And me keep continuing to question that I'm missing something. It must be me. I don't belong in here because the stuff that I'm seeing clearly is the opposite of what everyone's saying, which ended up all being true. But I don't know. I wish I could have a better answer for you, but it's if it was happening, it wasn't happening in front of me.
What do you think? Do you still have a lot of friends and stuff that are still in the military?
Enough, yeah.
What's the current kind of consensus on culture within the military? Is it going further down that road of everybody kind of becoming disillusioned, or is there any positive change in direction at all?
I want to be fair in saying that the group of people that I spent most of my time with, so I existed, I guess, in an echo chamber of my own sort of friend circle and colleagues that I got along with. And then it's like kind of high school where you have cliques of, I had intelligence buddies that were super smart and fun to hang out with. I had you know what I mean, guerrilla grunt buddies who are super, I'll say smart and fun to hang out with in a different way. So I have a sort of a good experience, a good breadth of people that I know and knew. A lot of them are still in, and I would say the vast majority of them are embarrassed. The morale is tanking. The exiting CDS on record was saying, if you don't agree with our diversity incentives or the new military that we're creating, you're a Russian asset. You know what I mean? So that's not a direct quote, but that's more or less what was happening. And then immediately after he left, we installed the obvious diversity hire of the first female CDS. And I never met her. I never worked with her. I don't know anyone that did work with her that spoke highly of her. And there's a lot of people I knew that were imminently qualified above that, in my opinion, of, again, whatever my opinion's worth. But it's
worth
like,
something. I mean,
it's just, there's this never ending trend of the last 5 to 10 years of, this is the direction we're going, accept it, you know what I mean? And join us, or you're part of the problem. And it's like, okay, should you be able to have long hair in the military? Like, yeah, probably. I don't know. Do you do your job? I don't care what your hair color or length is, or if you have a beard or not. Just show up to work on time and do your fucking job.
Should be a meritocracy. I mean? Like you look at positions, like you look at firefighters, you look at police officers, you look at the military. There's 3 areas, and I know there's a lot more, where it has to be merit-based. Otherwise, like, your job is to defend the nation, not to worry about your hair color. Like, what are we talking about?
But so the Canadian military is the most top-heavy in the world by a huge margin, because we don't have a big military, and we have hundreds of generals in the military in Canada, which makes no sense for how many people that we have. So we have this disproportionate representation of super senior people making decisions that affect everybody, who are so out of touch and so well paid and never affected by any of the things that they're instituting or installing their fingerprint or their legacy.
Right.
They want to get their check in their box for their PER, which is your annual review or whatever it's called now. So they want to be seen as the person who was helping and doing this and that. But it's like, the vast majority of people that are affected by these things think that it's a joke, and they think the current military is a joke. You have tampons in the men's bathrooms in the military.
Thank Justin Trudeau for that one.
I'm sorry, but that's an embarrassment.
Of course,
should trans people in the military? Sure. Like, does the trans person do his or her job, or they them job? Like, I don't care, man.
I also don't
just
care.
Just keep it to yourself.
Yeah, I think how I see it. Like, I think we should just stick with biology. If you want to pretend you're something else afterwards, go nuts. I don't care. I agree with you. It's a meritocracy. If you can do your job, do your job. But I don't have to partake in whatever game you're playing, though, either.
Well, that's the thing about the military, is that it's not about you. You never do anything in the military alone. Very rarely. From your first basic training, you're assigned a fire team partner, and that's literally what they are. Like, you are a fire team together. You do everything together. You shower together. You shit together. You live together. You sleep together, because you always have accountability of not only yourself, but where your buddy is. And if you're not there and someone asks where you are, your buddy knows where you are. So you're sort of okay. You've got his top cover, her top cover. It's never about an individual in the military. And that's now what it is. It's an organization of 40,000 or whatever it is, individuals who are just tanking this ship at an exponential rate. And my buddies are embarrassed. They're stuck because they have families and mortgages, and
for sure.
You know what I mean? They don't, a lot of them don't want to do it. They're frantically trying to put out fires on their way out, but they're just stuck, and they just want it to go back to, I hate the word inclusive, but like, bring everybody in as long as they can keep up. Who cares if you're gay, black, lesbian,
keep the politics
purple?
out of it.
Yeah. Nobody that I've met in the military cares about that.
Not at all.
There's not, I was never, you know what I mean, seeing this overt racism that everybody's talking about, that it was a super problem in RMC and sexual assault. So I was like, that stuff is not an endemic. It's not. But the media likes to spin it. Mm-hmm. It's clickbait. It allows you to institute these other overarching policies that pushed out, I think it was 4 or 5 CDSs in a row, which conveniently lined up landing with General Wayne Eyre, who pushed the mandates, you know what I mean, with unscientifically and all that stuff. And there's a bunch of things going on in the background about that. But there's certainly patterns here that people need to understand and see. And this is a long-winded answer to your question of saying guys and gals, and they just want out now. Like, anybody I know that was a high performer, they're just stuck and they want out.
Well, if you think about it, whether it be business, whether it be military, any sort of institution, if you're running it, you can have 3 different modes really in terms of standards. Is you can either try to make sure you're maintaining the level of the bar that you've set, can push the bar higher or you can lower the bar for everyone. And so whether it be the hair, the dress code, all of this kind of stuff, it's not necessarily that I look at any single one of those issues and it, triggers me per se, but it's the culture of this constant lowering of the bar and lowering of the standard, which to me, even you even see this with kids and stuff now in schools and all of this kind of stuff. They perform worse. It's not that you're letting more people in and then they start to really okay, you get this inclusive umbrella and then people start to thrive because you've got more people joining in. I think even just on a human level, there's a deep drive to want to push that bar for a lot of folks. And especially something like the military, that's the type of person it draws, like even yourself, right? A high performer, you go those 10 days of trials to see if you can even make the cut. Part of that, I'm sure, is also just, I want to know if I can meet these standards on a personal level. So you start to lower that. And yeah, I can just see how the morale would start to fall apart within the military. And do you think that's part of it at all? Like that is kind of the common culture within the military, is getting pushed down from top to bottom, at least?
It definitely is. I was on another podcast in the fall of last year where I mentioned the spying that happened during the trucker convoy in Ottawa. So I'll answer the question in a second. I just want to sort of give context as to how I'm going to answer it. But 5 times CanSoftCom, so the Canadian Special Forces, flew a King Air plane, which is a spy plane essentially equipped with super advanced tech to scrape data from any device that can transmit a signal. So that means watches, phones, computers, anything that sends or receives data, this plane will pick up and it will harvest any or all of it, with or without you even knowing it happened. So this is sort of one of those cyber attacks that you can call it an attack. Well, it's basically just spying or surveillance. So 5 times this happened over the convoy in Ottawa. The flight diverted from its set path, flew directly over the convoy in a scraping more or less pattern, and conducted this illegal spying operation.
Wait a minute. So we have technology that can be in an airplane flying above. How many, doesn't really matter how many feet. It's obviously you don't know what's happening. And their technology can, on a flyby, scoop all the information that's on my phone.
Oh yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, everything.
So like everybody's like 100,000 phones all at once. It can just scoop all the information.
So whatever's in your phone is now in that plane.
That is mental. I had no idea we had that. That's crazy.
So I didn't find out about that until I think it was early 2023. Somewhere in around that neighborhood, I found out about that had happened. I had been to the convoy myself just because I wanted to see what was going on, because it was apparently the Canadian January 6th or whatever, whatever the CBC title, insert CBC title. Yeah. And I went to it and it was bouncy castles and hot dogs and coffee and DJs and loud, obnoxious horn honking and music, into the night. But nobody there was violent that I saw. Nobody there was belligerent. There's obviously, if you have thousands of people drinking, are you going to have a problem drinker? For sure. Like, have you ever been to a bar?
Yeah.
There's somebody there that can't hold his alcohol and he should be dealt with individually. But once I found out about this flight, I started digging into ATIPs. So I started digging into access to information because I was an intelligence analyst and I know how to find things. So I dug into ATIP. A year and a half after I requested the 30-day to get information by law ATIP notice,
right.
They sent me the email traffic of some genius civilian recognized the tail number on this plane as being a military flight and and there was articles about this. I didn't see them, but in hindsight, looking back in I think the fall of, or maybe this summer or spring of 22, someone had flagged it. And then it came across my attention and I said, okay, I want the email traffic because I know how this works. You can't set up even a training mission, which this was a training operation, according to CanSoftCom. You can't set that up of people flying. So you need at least 2 pilots in that plane. You need at least 1 comms researcher, who is the person operating that sophisticated surveillance equipment. You probably need a signaler on board who's operating transmitting equipment like radios or whatever else tech they're using. You've got a plane with a handful of people in it minimum who are aware of what's going on. That cannot happen by accident. If that plane deviated so far from its path that it was supposed to be flying according to the military's public affairs officers, where it was supposed to be flying about 20 kilometers south of where it ended up over the convoy. According to the email traffic, that wasn't their plane and they didn't know it was there. So that was the first request by the journalist saying, okay, we saw a plane with a tail number. Can you tell us why and how your plane got there? The PAO on the email, on the ATIP that I received, I can send it to you guys if you want to throw it up on the screen here, replied by saying, that's not our flight. Sorry, try again. And then the journalist was like, it is your flight. Do you want to try again? Like, this is all email traffic I'm sort of summarizing, at which point they came back saying, oh, my bad. Didn't realize that it actually was our plane. Didn't know that it went there. It was just a training operation. None of these things can happen in the military without every single person being heavily invested in what's going on in this very expensive machinery and people that are invested in flying it. They absolutely knew what it did. They absolutely knew why they were doing it. And somewhere there are people who I've asked to come forward to corroborate what I'm saying, and they're not. And I wish they would. And I kind of understand why. And when I mentioned this on the podcast, I can't mention any names. I would never burn a source, but people have reached out to me to say, not only is what I'm saying accurate, but there's a lot more that I don't know, and they're not even comfortable telling me what it is. And some of them have left the military as well because they're so sick to their stomach. This is sort of a long-winded answer to your question originally. Like, they can't handle being around this anymore, and they just don't want to be a part of it. So somebody somewhere, please, you know what I mean, bring this information up because I know it's there. And the other ATIP that I submitted, which led me to submit the ATIPs, I forgot this. You guys get me so fired up. You guys ask such good questions that I'm diving into stuff. But so if we rewind back to early 2022, the convoy, I think, is still on or has maybe just finished because they tore it down and kicked in doors to arrest all the dangerous people with no weapons. I got a phone call from a colleague at the time who said, just so you're aware, like, your name came up in a meeting that you were seen as being there, just so you know, like, the military's tracking that. So either they had assets on the ground, which is likely, that saw me and recognized me, which I doubt, or they scraped my data on my phone and they knew I was there because my cell phone number is obviously associated to me and so as everyone else's. And that was a huge sort of wake-up call that I guess I compartmentalized and put in my back pocket at the time because I had so many health problems while my career was floundering. And like coming back to it a year later, gained all that fidelity with all these ATIPs and all this other stuff. But I mentioned that because I submitted another ATIP to figure out what the intelligence assets were doing on the ground, specifically a special division of intelligence assets that I know about, and what they were doing, who they were working with, what information did they gather, and who did they share it with. And I asked for that 18 months ago, and I'm still waiting on that. So these ATIPs are being blocked by someone who does not want to share that information because it's pretty damaging, probably, what they were doing and who they were doing it with, and they won't release it.
That's insane.
Well, even too, it goes, I think, much further than just the Freedom Convoy in the surveillance realm, because we even saw Public Health Canada admitted to tracking and monitoring the data from 33 million Canadian cell phones, which represented 87% of the population. It was probably like 60% now after all the immigration over the last 2 or 3 years. But yeah, they were monitoring 87%. And one of the main things that they were looking at was just looking at patterns of how people were traveling and stuff throughout COVID. But they used that, seemingly used that technology on a nationwide level as well. So like how far and how deep do you really think, say, the surveillance apparatus in Canada goes?
Well, in Canada, you need a warrant to look through someone's devices, or you need to be at least a person of interest suspected of having done something of an indictable offense. You know what I mean? So there's technology that has existed for a long time of things called stingrays. So you have police situated in a van outside. They have tech inside that van or truck or whatever that will act as mimicking a cell phone tower. So if you have a drug dealer, suspected terrorist, whatever has raised a flag of we need to intercept this person's data, and then they've gone through the proper due diligence to set up this equipment, and the courts know about it and judges know about it, and they've signed off on these warrants, you can now collect from this person to justify why you're looking at them. And if they're not doing anything, you should be getting rid of it and leaving not coming back. but that requires a whole bunch of rule and law following, which none of that was done in Ottawa, because you cannot get a warrant to surveil and harness information or steal information from, I don't know, 10,000 people that were there. I don't know. It flew over, maybe it's 50,000 with 5 flights. I don't know how many people were there.
So you don't even know who's there. So it's not even possible.
But the capability, there was an article in the paper, it was in Bloomberg, I believe. Did I send it to you via text? I think I sent it to you, or I sent it to someone else, of the OPP that is using graphite to spy on journalists in Canada.
No.
Come on.
Yeah. So they're using
we're
it.
definitely being watched.
I'm sure they're using it for other purposes too that are legitimate, and they should be doing those things. But if you're looking at journalists with spyware that is designed to illegally, enter people's devices and scrape data, we're in a pretty problematic situation now where how do we come back from that?
You don't.
Well, that's my point, is that, so I know that there is procedures that are supposed to be followed in order to gather this kind of data on citizens, but even all that surveillance of 33 million devices was done without any of that. So they surveilled the entire nation under the pretext of it being within this crisis.
For your health and safety.
For your health and safety, yeah. But then they admitted themselves that they did not follow proper protocol during that. So to me, I look at that going, okay, they seemingly didn't do any of the procedure for Ottawa. They weren't doing it for COVID on large. Just how, and I know this is kind of more speculation than anything, and you don't really have to go down that realm if you don't want to, but it's just like, is this almost a daily occurrence that, if you've got certain wings within the government, and I'm sure that they would all be highly confidential and top security kind of thing, but it's just, oh, hey, throw our own name out there. Just like, oh, Liam and Jonathan are starting to make up a lot of ruckus with this whole Blendr News thing. Like, maybe we'll throw a tag on them and just kind of see what they're up to or whatever.
I wouldn't be surprised if you both are on a list.
Oh,
and maybe keep your phone usage to a minimum unless you've got a secure device. Like, you probably want to think about hardening up your comms, depending on what you guys are saying or not saying on that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I would bet that your phone, there's no secure app. Signal is not secure. Obviously, regular message, SMS is not secure. WhatsApp, none of the Telegram, none of these things are secure. People have some kind of false sense of, oh, it's an encrypted thing. None of that matters anymore. These are penetrable devices. There's zero notification. You don't have to click on a scary link anymore. Pegasus was probably the most famous incidence of this with Jamal Khashoggi. I think that was back in 2018. And then I got into the cyber stuff about a year later and started going down that rabbit hole. And the collection capabilities of not necessarily Canada, because we don't have anywhere near the same toys that some of the allies do. It is absolutely wild what they can get from you from anywhere in the world, tracking you.
Anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world.
Damn.
And I remember, because I went into this whole kind of security apparatus for a while and digging deep into it, and, let me know if I'm off base here at all. But so there's the Five Eyes, right? Which is America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, correct? And so, yes, we have these procedures and things in place that you're not allowed to surveil your own citizens without a warrant. But say Australia or the UK or America doesn't have to go through those same hoops to spy on us in Canada. So I remember there being a lot of talk about how even within the Five Eyes, it's the Canadian intelligence apparatus might sit here and go, hey, we're not able to surveil these citizens of ours, but if, our British allies do and then give us the information, then we haven't actually broken any laws. Like, would you imagine that certain things like that are
I wouldn't be surprised if that's
yeah.
going on. I don't have any sort of direct knowledge of that. I did work, when I was in intelligence, I did work with some folks at the CSE, at CSE, which is the Canadian Securities Establishment.
Okay.
It's sort of the Canadian version of the NSA.
Right.
CSIS was involved in some stuff, not really with me, that I just, you get so many different sources of information and everybody's trying to cooperate sort of as much as possible. But again, everything's sort of siloed. But I would not be at all surprised if things like that were going on based on the capabilities and some of the new incentives that people have. It's I try not to think about it too much. This stuff literally can keep you up at night, especially if you've been exposed to sort of as much as I have. But you kind of just have to keep your chatter to a minimum or get a very hardened device. But at the end of the day, if a nation state is trying to come after you, like let's say, you know what I mean? Like Saudi Arabia in the case of Jamal Khashoggi, if they want to come for you, they have the means to do that. There's no device you can get that's not penetrable. So just be aware of that.
That's wild. So
Sleep tight.
Yeah. I'm pretty good at like out of sight, out of mind. I'll just go play with my kid. I'll forget about it all. It's fine, man. I'm good. So you've been out of the military for a long time.
Just a year. Out of the military for a year.
For a year.
1 year, yeah.
That was okay. So how long did it take you to process out?
About a year.
It took about a year. Yeah.
And that's with me kicking and screaming that I'm done.
Right.
Like you can exist in that sort of holding platoon for sometimes years if you just want to keep collecting your pension, and a lot of people will do that just to ride their pension a bit longer. And I get it. It's not an indictment of those people. Mm-hmm. They have their own reasons and 2 ex-wives or whatever, you know what I mean? They need to deal with. Sure. But it's like when I knew I was done, like there was so much going wrong medically, and I could not articulate a reason that I would ever be able to trust the people that I was essentially living and breathing.
That you gave all the trust to.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. What does life look like for you now? How's the last year been, and what's kind of how did you like kind of become a civilian again? How'd you break out of all that?
It's an honest assessment would be that every part of my life has improved exponentially since leaving.
Love that.
I'm able to let go of a lot of that stuff. I still am in contact with a handful of people. I don't regularly stay in touch with a lot of folks in the military just because, again, I don't want to poison the well. Like there's folks that are well aware of everything that's gone on, and we can talk about that together, and they kind of keep their lips shut when they're at work just for the reasons of, like I said, they have their own, they need to pay the mortgage. But I'm very fortunate. Again, something the military has done correct for me was that they let me go with a medical release, obviously, and then the pension associated with that. So I'm making roughly the same salary for a couple years after they let me go. So I have time and space to situate myself where I go to physio every week, multiple times a week, massage therapy, psychology, all these things that they line you up with. And that is something that, if done correctly, a lot of people get it, some don't. If it's done correctly, the military can really be amazing, situating people as like having their best sort of carpet rolled out for them on the way out, which is what I got. So I've seen sort of the best and worst of this. And I'm a lot happier. I still got a lot of back pain, which I sort out, and we'll talk offline, but the pain and the nonstop appointments kind of is never going to end for the foreseeable future. But at least I don't have to go and sit and be around these people that I have no time for anymore. And
it's a mental bandwidth thing sometimes, right? Like I notice is like, I would say like, I look at life in chapters, and I think every chapter has to have a purpose. But I think, through COVID for me, what I kept saying is that it still had its hooks in me. So my last chapter of owning restaurants and being in that business took me a long time to completely unplug from, just because of the economic damage, and just because they're saying, oh, it's 2 weeks, it's this, it's that. You try to make everything work. Sold my last restaurant in February. We're kind of out of that game now, but it had its hooks in me for a long time. But when I finally sold it in February, like the amount of mental bandwidth I cleared up is insane. Like I've been, I know it's not the same, but I've been exponentially happier as well. And I just feel so much better and so much more free. And my mind is operating so much better as well. So I can only imagine for you, that being your whole life for so many years and something you dedicated yourself to, you finally get out and it's just, you clear up all this mental space. So it's good.
Well, I have a handful of, I have at least a half a dozen of people I know that now have autoimmune issues that are either still in, or they've been released, or some combination of that. They're like on their way out type thing. And they have a lot of questions, and they reached out to me because they're like, wow, I have a lot of the same problems as you, or so-and-so is this, and now I need this surgery or whatever. And they're kind of, and it's just scary. It's like, man, and these are people I never really surrounded myself with people that I thought were underperforming, or, dead weight. It was the people that were constantly putting their hand up to do more kind of all end up in the same place. And
that makes sense.
So the guys that I'm talking about and the gals that I'm talking about are all solid people, good soldiers, it doesn't matter what trade they're in. It doesn't make any difference. But I'm in touch with them a little bit, and it's sometimes it's just venting, and like a soldier has the right to bitch, or however that saying goes. And man, it's unfortunate, but some things are done right. Like I said, I was very fortunate with how I was treated on the way out, and I had some really understanding staff that would listen and sort of align me with what I needed.
That's good to hear. Love that.
Just to kind of on a finish out close wise, is there, if you were like king for a day and over the military, what do you think would need to be done to start pushing it in the right direction? If there was kind of a checklist of things, or at least even priorities.
Wow, that's a great question. I very deliberately avoided senior staff officer jobs and roles because I joined the military at 29. Like I didn't have a ton of time, left in my career to be doing physically demanding hard things. So I was kind of always surrounded by and maybe getting along better with NCMs or NCOs or other junior officers maybe that were younger than me, because we kind of had the same mindset. That's not to say there isn't senior officers or whoever that do a great job and they're in there for the right reasons. But like I said, there's too many senior officers. We have way too many cooks in the kitchen, and everybody is trying to have their fingerprint on something. Mm-hmm. And they know that if their diversity thing gets picked up, that they get that stamp on their resume, and then they get to go off and walk into a job at the UN or NATO where they're making $500,000 a year tax-free, living in Europe or New York or whatever. And we need all those people who are just there to collect, we need them to go. And we could probably, even though the military is considerably smaller than it was even a few years ago, we probably could deal with a lot less than we have now. So fewer people that are way more qualified, that are able to handle more than one thing at a time, and just sort of trim it down and leave it to an elite number of people, whether you're an elite cook or you're an elite radio operator or you're an elite administrator as a logo or whatever. Like just leave it to the people who want to be there, who, are not just a drain on the public service tax dime to, prop up their pensions because, that they can't do anything else. They've been in the public they've been in the public sector their entire life. So hopefully that's kind of an answer.
For sure.
Coming from a very uneducated junior officer, that's what I see.
I feel like that same strategy would apply to government as well.
Well, it's interesting. I think
we become bloated bureaucracy.
I think that applies to a lot of different institutions and sectors because, we were even just talking in our last episode about there's a guy named James Burnham back in the 1940s who prophesized that the future essentially power brokers of society, and he saw this across different countries as well, would be, he called it a managerial revolution, that it wouldn't be like the capitalists who had all the power in society anymore, it'd be administrators. And you see this across, whether it be military, this is what you're saying, it's like this branch of just administrators and manager levels that aren't actually doing anything. They're not boots on the ground. They're not making things any better for the actual aims of the military. But it's the same with like even universities. You go to public schools, you look at who they've been hiring over the last few decades, and like even teacher levels are stagnant, but administrators have just skyrocketed. And to me, I see that being a big issue all across society. So yeah, I do think that definitely answered the question. Anything else you wanted to add today?
I said a lot of negative stuff, so I was hoping I could bookend it with, I talked about really awesome people, and I kind of want to end it with really awesome people. Sure. So a buddy of mine, Aaron Dale, who was used to be a special forces operator as well, got out, became a Toronto police officer. He set up a program called the Military Veterans Awareness Program, where he and a few of his colleagues travel all around the world now. It started off kind of locally within the GTA in Ontario and has been spreading and catching like wildfire because they're getting such amazing feedback from everyone they're doing it with. But their job is essentially to train and equip officers all over the world with tools and abilities to recognize veterans when they show up sort of as a first responder, because a veteran has a whole depending on what this person's been exposed to, has a whole host of other, like an operational stress injury, whether it's OSI or PTSD or who knows what this person's been through or not. And maybe they're very well trained and maybe they're very well armed, and you kind of need to recognize signs and symptoms of that and handle it accordingly. It doesn't mean if the guy breaks the law, he doesn't go to jail, but like, let's give him or her some tools, along the way, that we understand that this person might have been through some things. So the Military Veterans Awareness Project helps train these people, these police officers, these frontline police officers, to handle and respond to these situations accordingly. And it's just been a huge success across the board. And a huge shout out to Aaron and his colleagues that are doing that, because it's pretty awesome and those guys are great.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like we could use something like that. And it's interesting when we started sort of reworking the police force in Toronto and in Ontario and Canada to be more focused on the psychological side of things instead of actually doing what he's doing. When you're giving people that actually know how to handle themselves, they're ready for the stress, they know how to use a weapon, the right psychological tools to deal with another cohort of people. We just decided to sidestep the police officer with the gun and go right to the psychologist, which is insane. So I'm really happy to hear that someone is actually doing this the right way so that those people do get treated properly. Because when you see these things, you don't just want guns pulled and people killed. That's the last thing you want to see. So it's great that someone has the wherewithal and he's your buddy that it's just like, hey, we know we can fix this. We're going to give them the right set of tools. And then at least we know we're going to have better outcomes across the board for these people. So that's great. I love that.
Right on.
Great. Well, thanks for sitting down. It was great chatting with you. And
you guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Enjoyed the insights.
Keep making good content because I love it.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Appreciate it. All right. Bye, everybody.